Hello, you're watching the Daily Roundup by People's Dispatch, where we bring you some of the top stories from around the world. Let's take a look at the headlines. Israel conducts airstrikes on Gaza a day after deadly raid in West Bank. France to recall its ambassador in Burkina Faso after agreeing to withdraw troops. Peruvian police continue repression of demonstrators as protests intensify. ICC to resume investigation into Duterte-era killings linked with Philippine drug war. In a latest round of attacks on Palestinians, Israel launched airstrikes on the blockaded enclave of Gaza on Friday, January 27. The new attack comes a day after the Israeli occupation forces conducted the deadliest raids in the West Bank, killing 10 people. According to reports, Israeli airstrikes hit the Al-Maghzi refugee camp located at the center of the Gaza Strip in the early hours on Friday. At least 13 strikes reportedly took place on the camp. Other locations to be hit by Israeli fighter jets include the Al Zaytun neighborhood in the south of Gaza City and an open area east of Beit Hanun in northern Gaza. Witnesses, as cited by various local news reports, state that Israel had fired 2 rockets into the territory around midnight on Thursday, just hours before the airstrikes. No casualties were reported so far. This attack comes shortly after Israel conducted a violent, large-scale raid in Jenin on the occupied West Bank. 9 people were killed in the Palestinian city, including a 61-year-old woman during the raid, which the locals deemed to be a massacre. Around 20 others were injured after occupation forces fired live rounds during the mass raid that lasted over 5 hours. Meanwhile, on the same day, another man was killed in a similar incident at Al-Ram near Jerusalem. Apart from these attacks, 4 Palestinian students were also shot later that day in the city of Al-Bireh. The shooting happened after a confrontation between occupation forces and students from Birzeit University protesting against the bloody raid in Jenin. France announced recalling its ambassador from Burkina Faso on Thursday, January 27. The announcement comes a day after France agreed to the Burkinabe military government's demands to withdraw troops from the country. Earlier this week, Burkina Faso declared that it had given France 1 month's time to withdraw its troops from the West African country. France agreed to the demand on Wednesday in a latest move at scaling down its military presence among its former colonies in Africa. The Burkinabe section of the Sahel region currently has around 400 French military personnel stationed. This has been a source of contention for the Burkinabe people and also the latest coup government led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré that came to power in September 2022. The French forces entered Burkina Faso in 2013 as part of its decade-long operation against jihadist insurgents in the Sahel region in West Africa. Jihadist groups sprouted in the region as a fallout of political instability and civil war in Libya after the NATO-led invasion in 2011. French military presence in the country and its neighbors like Mali and Guinea has brought about large-scale anti-French demonstrations and political instability. Burkina Faso alone witnessed 2 coups last year. Burkinabe protesters have been demanding the return of Luc Halad, the French ambassador in Ouagadougou, after tensions grew between the Traoré coup government and France. Similar anti-French sentiments have also led to coups and mass protests in Mali and Guinea. The coup government in Mali has also previously accused the French of causing political instability and of espionage. The bitter breakdown in relations led to Mali ejecting the nearly 5,000 French troops by August 2022. Police repression against the ongoing protests continue in Peru. In the latest, protesters in the city of Los Alamos, Ica region in south-central Peru were attacked early on Thursday, January 26. According to reports, plainclothes police officers along with members of private security agencies were involved in the attack that left several injured. The recent attack comes on the very day that the National Human Rights Coordinator (CNDDHH) presented a report alleging torture and inhuman and degrading treatment by the police. The CNDDHH report titled 50 Days of Repression in Peru documented 46 extrajudicial killings and 912 arrests ever since protests broke out against the coup government on December 7. The report argued that current levels of repression were never experienced before in the history of democratic Peru. Peru has witnessed massive mobilization since December 7 against the coup government of Dina Boluarte. Boluarte was appointed president by the Congress after deposing and jailing democratically elected left-wing President Pedro Castillo as a political showdown with the right-wing dominated Congress intensified. As per official reports, crackdown on demonstrators has left more than 60 people dead since December and injured dozens more. Boluarte's crackdown on protesters has been widely condemned both nationally and internationally. Earlier this week, left-wing Honduran President Xiomara Castro criticized the crackdown and the violence against protesters while also denouncing the coup and called for the release of Castillo. This prompted the coup government to recall the Peruvian ambassador to Honduras on Thursday. In the meanwhile, protests continue to intensify against the Boluarte government. Thousands of people from across the country gathered in Lima on Thursday, calling for the immediate resignation of Boluarte and Castillo's release. Castillo is currently in prison and is charged with instigating a rebellion for his attempt to dissolve the Congress before the coup. Protesters are also calling for fresh general elections and the convening of a constituent assembly, as was planned by Castillo as his confrontations with the Congress intensified. After more than a year, the International Criminal Court has decided to resume its investigation into extrajudicial killings associated with the war on drugs in the Philippines. The authorization was given by the pre-trial chamber of the ICC on Thursday, January 26, after it found the Filipino government's willingness to investigate the killing unsatisfactory. In November 2021, the ICC paused its investigation on procedural grounds after the Rodrigo Duterte government asked for a deferral. The Duterte government argued that Philippines was already conducting an investigation of its own, and that as per the principles of complementarity, the ICC, which is the court of last resort, should respect the primary jurisdiction of the Filipino judicial process. The stand was continued under the current Ferdinand Marcos Jr. government. ICC prosecutor Karim Khan, who replaced Fatou Bensouda, the prosecutor to initiate the investigation, petitioned twice last year, arguing that the process within the Philippines would not be satisfactory. The panel of judges in the ICC eventually agreed with Khan's argument on Thursday after weighing in testimonies from victims and the government's continued inaction. ICC prosecutors have been trying to prosecute Duterte-era officials for the massive extrajudicial killings that took place in the name of the government's anti-drug campaign. Estimates of the killings vary from over 6,000 victims under official data to nearly 20,000. ICC prosecutors have estimated that between 12,000 and 30,000 casualties are linked to the anti-drug campaign. A vast majority of those targeted in the anti-drug campaign were drug users from among the nation's poor. Apart from investigating the nationwide killings that occurred since Duterte assumed the presidency in 2016 to 2019, when the Philippines withdrew from the Charter of Rome, prosecutors also want to investigate killings since 2011 in Davao City. Duterte first launched the violent anti-drug campaign in the city as mayor and even raised the violent vigilante group Davao Death Squad, continued by his daughter Sara Duterte, who succeeded him as a mayor and is currently serving as the vice president. And that's all we have for today's episode. For more such stories, visit our website peoplesdispatch.org and follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.